everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I have a watercolor heart Valentine's card to share with you today. And so to begin, I have an A2 folded card, and I'm using a piece of watercolor cardstock, watercolor paper, and I'm using my Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor travel set. And I have some tube paints that I'm going to use as well. Now these paints are in my watercolor set, but I bought the paints and I'm going to use them straight from the tube. So I have Purple Lake and Burnt Sienna. These colors are gorgeous together, and right now they're my favorite two colors to blend. I have a number 8 round Grumbacher brush, and this is a watercolor brush I picked up at Michael's. And I have this little artist palette I picked up at my local art store. It was like $2 or $3. It was pretty cheap for mixing color on. So the reason why I'm using the paint from the tubes is because it's very vibrant that way, opposed to the cake pans that are in the watercolor set, the Cotman watercolor set. So I'm going to use these straight from the tube. I am taping down my watercolor paper to the back of my cutting mat. I don't have a stiff board to use, but I use this and it works as well. I have this watercolor pencil and it's in a medium charcoal brown color, and I'm going to use this to sketch out where I want my heart to be. I like using a watercolor pencil because I can draw lines and then later they dissolve with the water from the watercolor so you don't see them. So it kind of solves the issue of having pencil lines underneath your watercolor, which I was having trouble with, and then I came up with this idea and it works great. So I'm sketching out the heart, and very loosely, very lightly. You can also use a eraser with the watercolor pencils, so that's super handy too. So I'm just working out the placement of the perimeter of the heart. I want to make sure that it's big enough that it can hold my sentiment and still have enough room around it so it's not pushing right to the edge of the paper. So I'm coming in with my Faber-Castell 2B sketching pencil. This is a pencil and I do want these lines to show up after. So I'm going to sketch out the word love, and I'm doing that in handwriting, and then I'll show you how to make this look sort of like a calligraphy sketch, and by adding some thick and thin strokes to this drawing. So I'm coming in with a 1/2 inch Grumbacher flat wide brush, and I'm going to lay down some water in that heart shape that I drew earlier. And so I just want to lightly dampen the paper, and I'll let that soak for a second, and this is where the colors will blend and kind of move around in this space. And so I'm putting the paint's on my palette, and I'm just putting a little dab. I don't need a lot. This isn't a big area that I'm coloring. I do find though that when I use paint from the tube, I require a lot more paint, whereas if I'm using it from a cake pan where I wet it with my brush, a little goes a long way. But I do like the vibrancy that I get from the tubes. So I'm just blotting it down in that damp part of the heart that I put the water on earlier. And so just coming in with the Purple Lake and then the Burnt Sienna, and I kind of want them to commingle in the middle of the heart, where those real beautiful colors happen when they mix together. So I tipped my board, but I found that it wasn't blending, so I dropped a little bit of water on the heart. And then just tipping the board coaxes all the water and the pigment to run together and create those really pretty colors. And I also have some white showing in my paper. I wanted this to be really loose and kind of organic and more natural looking, not so controlled. And so I have sort of a rough edge around the heart, and then I have those white spots, which I was really happy with everything that way. And then I came in with some Purple Lake and made sure it was sort of wet on my brush, and then just tapped it to create some splatter marks. I have splatter all around the perimeter, but I have a concentration of splatter in the top left corner and the bottom right corner. And that's going to help create eye directional movement to open up the card. So now I have this all dry. I'm going to peel off my masking tape. And for this I'm using painter's tape. You can use watercolor tape, you can buy specialty tape, or just any sort of low adhesive tape works. So now I'm going to come in with my gold Jelly Roll pen, and I think this is my favorite writing instrument at the moment. I love this pen. It's so pretty. So I'm going to trace over the word love that I wrote beforehand so I can see my pencil sketch underneath the watercolor. Now that's a thing, if you do use pencil, you have to be mindful that it will show through of your watercolor. It gets trapped under the pigment. But in this case, I wanted that because I wanted it as a guide. So now the secret to making this look calligraphy style-like is to thicken your downstrokes. This is the easiest way. So if you imagine that you're drawing this with your hand, anywhere that you would be pulling down towards yourself to create a stroke, you want to make that thicker. So just drawing an extra wide line around it, curving it out and then in as you get to the bottom, and then filling in all of those little extra strokes that you've made with the gold pen. And it makes it look like you used a calligraphy pen or a brush or something. This is an easy trick. Sometimes calligraphy can be tricky, so this is sort of a cheat way, and it still looks really pretty and gives you those thin and thick stroke effects. So now I have these thin, cheap markers from Michaels. I'm going to come in with a darker one. It has two colors, but I like the darker brown. And so I'm just going to outline the word love. So on the inside of the letter forms and on the outside as well, just to give it a little bit of oomph and lift it up off that background a little bit more visually so you can read the word love. I find with the gold Jelly Roll pen, sometimes it's really easy to see, and then sometimes it's harder to read with the dark background, and then the way the light doesn't hit it, it seems to look a little darker. So I just want to emphasize the edges so that no matter what angle you are looking at it, you can still see the word clearly. And so I'm just carefully tracing around the edge, and I sped this up so you could see and you didn't have to watch my painstaking process. But I really had a lot of fun outlining this. I just took my time and did light strokes, working the line in one direction, not just putting down my pen and then pulling until I get to the end of the line. I just did little feathery strokes where it was trickier or where I felt that I didn't have as much control. And I found that that helped me get a nice even line. And so it created a nice, smooth, uniform look around the letter forms. And I had so much fun inking this. I just took a few minutes to myself and just really put my concentration into it. And it was so fun and therapeutic. It's kind of like coloring for me. This is probably my version of coloring, and I love it. I love working with ink and pen and just doing sort of detail things like this. So you could do a variety of things. You could do a white outline with a white gel pen. You could use a glitter pen. I thought about using a dark purple glitter pen as well, which I think would be nice. I also thought about doing a black pen as a shadow and then going over it with a purple glitter pen that creates a nice, rich, deep shadow as well. So there's a lot of options here. I thought the brown looked nice though because it kind of pulled in that warm tone of the burnt sienna, and also kept the warm colors from the gold, so it didn't overpower it too much. And so as I was working on this, I thought it looked really pretty, and I was really happy with how it was going. Sometimes with watercolor it's hit and miss, and sometimes there are happy surprises and happy accidents. And so I started to contemplate that I honestly wanted to keep this not as a card, but as just an art piece that I could frame and put in my art room. So as I worked on it, that's sort of the direction I started thinking. So once I had the letter forms outlined, I came back in with my gold Jelly Roll pen, and I just wanted to add some dots of splatter to accompany the splatter from the purple lake pigment that I had added earlier. So I put a few splatters on the top and the bottom of the sentiment in the heart, and then outside the heart as well. And I kept my gold splatters to the top left and bottom right, just to emphasize that eye directional movement too. So I don't want everything too balanced. I want to have some interest. So just adding a heavier concentration visually on the top left and bottom right. And so now this would be ready to put on a card. What I would do is I would get my tape runner and I would outline the perimeter of the base of my card, and then I would pick that up and line it up at the folded edge on my desk and then push it into place. Now I decided to keep this as an art print, so I didn't tape it to the card, but I did want to show you how you would do that. So this is my watercolor heart, I guess picture now, or card. It could be a card as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe so you're notified the next time I post a video. Thank you so much for watching.